You're listening to His Empire of Dirt by Pearlandpine. Chapter 32, Fritz Smith Got a Job. On Jeremy's birthday, Michael Afton sat alone in his new apartment and lit himself a candle. "Happy birthday to you," he hummed, the television blaring Star Trek: The Next Generation. "Happy birthday to you." He winced as he sat. He always flinched whenever he moved, his bones aching, his remnant keeping him just barely alive, always exhausted. "Happy birthday, my honey." He blew out the candle. "Happy birthday to you." He had moved out of Uncle Henry's without a word. He didn't want to defile the Emily household and Charlotte's legacy by rotting around the house like a speck of dust incarnate. It was a waste of space, and Uncle Henry didn't have room for wastes of space. He didn't deserve to have a fucking waste of space in his house. He didn't deserve to be surrounded by failure personified. So Mike had his apartment. He didn't do a lot. He watched TV mostly. He was entirely well versed in every single piece of pop culture of the 1980s. Star Trek, Married with Children. He had to stop after a while. Al Bundy reminded him of Dad. 21 Jump Street, the TMNT cartoon. He could probably quote all of them on the top of his head. He clung to life because he was waiting for Dad to come back. There wasn't a lot else to say about the matter. He had to wait for William Afton to resurrect Mom, Lizzie, and Evan. And then he would see how punished Mike was. And then maybe he would finally love him. Maybe he would forgive Mike for everything. I hate him so fucking much! Maybe Dad would finally come home. Uncle Henry, after searching for Mike and not finding him, Mike had been careful to cover his tracks, finally left Hurricane. Mike knew it wasn't forever. Uncle Henry would come back for Dad. He would come back to clean Charlotte's tombstone. He would come back because Freddy's was his curse, always luring him back to this place of wickedness. But it brought him an ease for Uncle Henry to temporarily be absent. He was going back to New Harmony, Mike heard through the grapevine, before traveling the world. Mike was glad for that. Uncle Henry had always been a solitary creature, but when home became prison, there only remained the desire to escape. If anyone deserved to get the fuck out of here, it was Henry. Not Mike. Mike would wait. In November of 1987, Michael Afton stared at his body in the mirror. Where he had once been strong, from Dad's insistence, for some reason when Mike was little, Dad always watched and curated what he ate. It was one of the few times Mike felt cared for. Dad didn't oppressively push his food away, but instead he gently insisted on other meals, saying, "You want to be strong, Mike. Believe me." He was now frail. Where he had once been tan and freckled, inherited from Mom, he was now lavender and sickly. His eyes had lost nearly all of their color, and his thick head of hair was thinning. I should get a wig, he thought, dragging his hand through his remaining hair. To go outside, he wore a hat to block the sun, sunglasses to hide his eyes, and a hygienic mask to hide his face. He would much rather be mistaken as a hypochondriac than a zombie. The temperature didn't bother him so much anymore. Nothing did. He couldn't feel anything anymore. He couldn't feel anything anymore. So wearing long-sleeved everything wasn't too much of a bother. He drove back to Hurricane one day, just to scope the area out. A moth to a flame. And more than a moth to a flame was he to Freddy's. Rather, he was a beggar on his knees, and the dino was his very own savior. More important than Christ himself. More effective than any healer in these United States. The diner was where he had killed Evan. The restaurant was where he was drawn to. The place where he sometimes worked with Dad and observed Uncle Henry. Freddy's was Eden. The devilish snake lurking at every single corner. And Mike was Eve, searching for his apple. Searching for an excuse to damn everyone else in the world just so that he wouldn't be alone. It was in his piece of crap car, listening to Guns N' Roses, that Michael flinched as a familiar figure walked into Freddy's. Jeremy was wearing his windbreaker that he had outgrown many years ago, his baseball cap still backwards, his face still freckled, his hair still kissed by the sun. Jeremy wasn't smiling, though. And that broke Mike's heart more than anything in the world. Jeremy didn't exit the restaurant for a while, Mike thought. And that got him worried. Was there an accident? What was he there for in the first place? Jeremy didn't have any little siblings, so there was really no purpose for him to be at Freddy's. What's wrong? There has to be something wrong. Is Jeremy okay? He has to be, or else he'll just die. Mike sharply inhaled, though his breathing never steadied. It couldn't, because he could never breathe easy with these terrible lungs, and barely managed to calm himself. It was when a second figure exited, as an early night fell upon Hurricane, that Mike's breathing left him once more. There was a man, his tall figure obscured by darkness, that exited the restaurant as most of its customers had abandoned it. It was the night guard. Mike figured from the man's uniform, a white shirt with black stripes on the shoulders, skinny black tie, and a golden security badge, and unreadable name tag. It wasn't his presence that caused Mike to flinch. It was when the man reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar pack of cigarettes and a lighter, igniting the end of the cigarette, blowing smoke into the night. From this distance, Mike still couldn't see the man's face. But the face was pale. His jawline was sharp, his hair was dark, and his eyes. His eyes grey. Dad. Mike sharply withdrew his keys from the ignition and jumped out of his car, accidentally slamming the door behind him. He stared at the figure from across the street before slowly advancing forward. He observed the man snuff out his cigarette under his shoe before rounding the corner of the building, his back illuminated by the dim lighting of the restaurant. Mike rushed forward, tripping on the sidewalk, his feeble heart pounding in his chest. "Dad," he began, and then he collided with something. Something softer than a wall. And he was ready to lower his voice into something unrecognizable and apologize to the person, but then he... "Oh, crap, sorry, man," Jeremy stammered, and he reeked of weed. and the smell almost made Mike want to cry out of pure nostalgia. Wasn't looking. Mike averted his gaze, ready to sprint away, ready to save Jeremy the embarrassment and rage from interacting with him. But when he tilted his eyes upward just a bit, Jeremy was smiling. He was smiling. And his toothy grin was a flash of whiteness that illuminated all of the darkness in Mike's brain. And Mike faltered, finally unable to run away from his life. It's all right. Mike finally willed himself to turn away, to forget the figure that he thought was his father, to abandon Jeremy once more. But Jeremy was quicker. You. He placed a hand on Mike's shoulder, and he was not insistent, nor was he harsh. Jeremy was incapable of being cruel or relentless to another living, breathing person, but I am barely alive, so please be cruel to me, my love. And gently turned him around. Mike was still wearing his mask and his sunglasses to conceal his identity. But he was immobile as Jeremy gazed upon him. The blond boy raised his hands and gingerly removed the glasses and the mask. And he stared into Mike's eyes as if searching for his soul. And Jeremy's blue-green eyes began to pool with tears. This was it. Mike was ready for disgust to wash over Jeremy. Mike was ready for Jeremy to assault him for his betrayal. Mike was ready for Jeremy to curse at him, to curse him himself, to curse the moment they had met, to admit that Mike was a bad fucking person. Mike was ready for it all. He wasn't ready for Jeremy's true reaction. You, Jeremy stammered, and he was smiling and crying, and then he fell onto Mike's chest. You're alive. Mike was still, and then all at once he fell apart, and he used all the strength in his pathetic body to rest his head against Jeremy's, and he cried. And he said the only thing he was adept at saying. I'm sorry. Jeremy had coerced Mike to take him home. Mike fumbled the keys into his sparsely decorated apartment and meagerly gestured to the inside of the place, shrugging as his heart raced. It was like he was interacting with his favorite celebrity or the subject of a crush he'd had since he was 1 year old. Jeremy lowly whistled, sticking his hands in his pockets. Finally got your own place, huh? Jeremy grinned like he had walked into the Taj Mahal. I'm glad, Mikey. Jeremy, I'm sorry. Oh, stop saying that. You're smarter than that. No, I'm not. Jeremy then turned, standing underneath the dim light of the kitchen, and he cautiously reached his hand up to Mike's face. Mike flinched, and Jeremy automatically jerked his hand away. Mike inhaled and softly took Jeremy's wrist and maneuvered his hand back to Mike's face. This was the first time since he had been scooped that Mike felt the blessing of warmth and love, and that he welcomed it, that he could deludedly convince himself that he deserved adoration. Jeremy frowned, not out of disgust, but out of pure sadness. What happened to you, Mikey? He whispered, his words barely formed. Mike exhaled. It's a really long story. Jeremy laughed lightly like a child, lightly like a gentle breeze on a summer's day. For you, Mike, I've got all the time in the world. When Mike was done with his convoluted, terrible tale, Jeremy nodded, absorbing all the information. You know why I took this piece of shit job, Mikey? Like, I could have gone to school. I could have moved on. You know why I did it? Mike shook his head. I've been looking for you. Fuck, Mikey. We all thought you were dead. I am dead. Can't you see? I would know, though. Jeremy jabbed a finger at his own chest, at his heart. I would have felt it, Mikey. I would have known. Then Jeremy began to cry. Do you really think so little of me? I wouldn't want you? I have never thought any negative thing about you. Mike breathlessly, candidly replied. You are the best part of me. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and then why would you leave, Mikey? Why would you leave? Do you think I would just forget you? I could never forget you. Because I'm just like Dad. You deserve the world, Jeremy. You deserve more than what... Jeremy sharply laughed. Not villainously, but in total disbelief. He leaned forward and cupped Mike's face in his hands. You are my world, Michael Afton. And, like he usually did, Michael began to cry. Nah, man, Jeremy said, passing Mike a joint, because Jeremy always had a joint on him. My mom's good at makeup. I'll show you how to do it. You shouldn't want to go into public with me. If you don't want to go out, Jeremy softly interjected, then we won't. You can stay inside and be my house husband. Jeremy curled his body on the bed, his hand tracing Mike's chest over his shirt. I'm going to get my teaching degree, and then we can move wherever we want. They'll talk about me in like, hey, there's this ridiculously handsome guy. I wonder if he's married. And someone will say, oh, he's gotta be. But I see that ghost in his house through the window. That really hot ghost. And I wonder if Mr. Fitzgerald is married to him. And I'll be the weird teacher who loves his students and is married to the mysterious stranger. Mike chuckled. The first time he had laughed in months. We can't even get married, Jeremy. One day we will. And until then, we'll just live the same way without the government officiation. Officiation. Yeah. Jeremy laughed and yawned. I told you I was going to marry you one day, Mikey. I wish you didn't leave, but I knew. I knew that something was wrong. I looked for you, and I'll never stop looking for you. How? How did you know something was wrong? You'd never call me trash. You'd never call me something bad. You'd never leave unless you had to. Jeremy took the joint and exhaled smoke. At least I can put in my 2 weeks already. I'll only have to be the night guard for 14 days. And then we're out of here. Hey, speaking of, who's the night guard now? Jeremy shrugged. I haven't seen him yet, but his name was on the roster when I left. Some guy named Dave, I think. Dave or David, something like that. Mike nodded, and he wrapped his arm around Jeremy and refused to let him go. You got moved to the day shift, though. Oh, you know, if he's handsome enough to take me away from you. Yo, Mike said with a laugh. Okay. 14 days. 14 days, and then we're free. And then I'll never leave you again. Never, Jeremy yawned and kissed the crook of Mike's neck. Never, ever. On November the 8th, after his shift concluded, Jeremy raced to Mike's apartment, shaking. Those animatronics are fucking insane, Mike. He frantically reached for his spliff. It's like they were trying to kill me. Mike paled. You should quit. Jeremy waved him off. It's in the contract somewhere. They could, sue me or some shit. I'll stick it out. Hey, they asked for my emergency contact. Can I put you down? Mike stilled. Use a fake name. I don't want Henry to know I'm around. It'll break his heart. I need to... Mike's shoulders sagged. I want to see him in person. Call me, Smith. Smith will be the last name. That's easy enough. I'll think of something. Don't worry. Jeremy managed to smile. It'll be fine. On November the 9th, Jeremy came home, his eyes a bit vacant. The music box, Mikey. The music box is driving me insane. He sighed and rested on Mike's chest. Thank God I've got you to come home to. You should quit. Or run away. You can get a new name. I'll tell Henry and they won't sue you. Nah. You don't want to talk to him yet. We'll do it when you're ready. Jeremy flooded his eyes shut. Fritz, by the way. Fritz Smith. Future Fritz Fitzgerald. On November the 10th, Jeremy came home crying. A kid went missing, he said with a strained throat. Mikey, what the fuck is with that place? It's fucking cursed. The day guard, he said nothing was wrong. Nothing was unusual. I've got to meet him, Dave, and see what his deal is, because he had to have seen something, Mikey. He had to. He had to. A fucking kid, Mike. Mike couldn't tell him what he knew to be true. William Afton was a murderer. And those 5 kids missing had died because Mike was a coward. He couldn't give Jeremy a good reason to leave him. On November the 11th, Jeremy came home, blank-faced. Freddy stealing his soul just as it stole everything. They're having an investigation about the missing kids. The restaurant is fucking denying everything, Mike. I know you love Henry, but he's... Jeremy shook his head, letting the words fall away. No, you can say it. What? Henry is a fucking bastard for leaving during this. He's a fucking coward. Jeremy never spoke cruelly about anyone. Mike nodded. On November the 12th, Jeremy brightened at the sight that Mike welcomed him with. He'd made dinner for both of them. Almost done, Jeremy. Mike smiled, his face aching with the effort. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Mikey. He kissed Mike on the cheek. I love you for this. I love you. I love you. Despite it all, it was the most truthful thing Jeremy Fitzgerald would ever say. On November the 13th, Jeremy came home beaming. Mike, thank fucking God they're moving me to the day shift. Since I've got mechanics expertise from working in the shop with Dad, they're moving me to the fucking day shift. I won't deal with this shit anymore, thank Christ. Mike clapped his hands together in celebration. Thank goodness. Yeah, I've got to fix up that one piece of crap animatronic. Oh, what's his name? What is his name? I don't know. He was puzzled before nodding. Mango, they call it. It was a Foxy, I think, but all the kids pulled her apart. I'll give her some of the old Fitzgerald charm, though. You know? They ate Chinese takeout and watched The Princess Bride on the couch. Jeremy rested his head on Mike's shoulder. Never leave me again, Mikey, he suddenly whispered. Mike smiled and kissed him. As you wish, honey. Mike received a call that day. Hell. Mr. Smith? Mr. Fritz Smith. Mike paled. Yeah? You need to come to the hospital. There's been a terrible accident. Everything went dark. Jeremy was unconscious. Mike listened to the steady beeping of the machine hooked up to him. Beep, beep, beep. Mike was drowning, thinking. I never should have let him leave. I should have kept him close. I should have been there. I never should have let this happen. Another bite. Another bite. Another fucking bite! After a few hours, Jeremy awoke. Thrashing, crying out in pain, clutching his bandaged head as if it was about to fall off. Where? Who? Jeremy, Mike said gently, standing from his chair that he had slept in. It's okay. You're okay. Nurse, he's... Who are you? Jeremy sobbed, nearly falling off the bed. Who the fuck are you? Get the fuck away from me! Get away from me! Who are you? Nurses and doctors rushed past Mike to restrain Jeremy from hurting anyone. Who are you? Mike wanted to die. Memory loss, severe personality changes, immobility in his limbs. The things that could have happened to Evan all happened to Jeremy. Mike did his best. Really, he did. But Mike wasn't good at anything. And he only knew how to break, not how to fix. He would try to coax Jeremy into peace. He would try to jog his memory. He would try to encourage him to do his stretches. But nothing worked. Jeremy never smiled. The light in his eyes had disappeared. He snapped at everything. His voice was harsher. He yelled at Mike when Mike tried to get too close, and he screamed for security when Mike had tried to touch his hand. "It was my fault," Mike said, burying his face in his hands. Jeremy lied on his side. "I shouldn't have let you. Stay the fuck away from me, Afton." His words were laced with venom, and all of the life had drained from him, and it too drained from Mike. And he was empty. They were both empty, and now Jeremy was broken. Broken and practically dead like the rest of them. Like everyone that Mike touched, because Mike fucking ruined everything he touched. So Mike went to where he was always drawn to. He went to Freddy's. "I'll take over his night shift," he said to the manager. And they were so desperate that they accepted him immediately. The animatronics tried to kill him, but Mike was even more of a robot than any of them. He remained composed, and whenever one of the stupid fucking robots almost managed to maul him to death, he welcomed it like a kiss from his honey. He was done. He was empty. At the end of his shift, he walked over to Mangle. The place was yet to open. He took a sledgehammer from Parts and Services and broke Mangle into 1,000,000 pieces. And then he went to the toy animatronics and broke them until they were but pieces on the ground. After a bit, he was laughing. Because he was delirious and mad and empty, and there was nothing to give. So why not take a bit? When he left for his shift, he saw Dave in the distance, smoking a cigarette. He was too far away to make out his face. But he knew. And Dave knew that he knew. And they both understood that they knew each other. And through the embers of the cigarette, Mike saw a manic smile tear across Dave's face. And Mike was so empty. He was so empty. He was so empty. He took a step forward to reach the security guard. But when he blinked, like a spectre, Dave, Dad, was gone.
"We tried to encourage him to stretch with the skateboard that you gave us, Mr. Smith,"
the nurse said. She frowned.
"He got so frustrated with it that he broke it in half."
"Is he..." Mike swallowed behind his mask. "Is he ever going to make a recovery?"
"How bluntly do you
Very.
Entirely."
The nurse nodded.
"With physical therapy, his movement in his limbs will likely return to him. His personality changes and memory loss. It will likely... He won't revert to who he was before the accident. We will keep tabs on him, but he could very well be like this for the rest of his life, Mr. Smith."
Mike sluggishly nodded. He looked at Jeremy from down the hall, and he did not say goodbye. He would never be able to say goodbye to Jeremy again. But he would always, always leave him. Stay away from me, Afton. When a nurse wasn't looking, Mike swiped a pill bottle from a cart.
He was... Fuck, get the stupid fucking bottle open. Okay, there. He was done. Done with Dad. Done with Freddy's. Done with everything. There's 1 pill, 2, 3, a dozen, 100,000, everything, everywhere, all at once. But Dad saved his life, the fucking bastard! Mike writhed on the floor, his veins glowing purple, wishing to be gone. I didn't even remember how he got there. On the bathroom floor, the remnant within him fucking keeping him alive. He didn't ask for this. He didn't fucking ask for any of this. He fucking hated everything and everyone. And as you wish, my honey, he hated Dad and Henry and Freddie and Evan and Liz and Mom and everyone. But he hated himself. Most of all, I am done here. But he wasn't. He would never be done. Not with Remnant. And as Mike had died and lived on the floor, he discovered the only fucking thing that can make his life tolerable. Kids were going missing. Dead. I am going to fucking stop you, Dad, and you are going to fucking die!
And from that day on, Michael Afton clung to life, not of volition, begging to forget, doomed to remember.